Hello, everyone. Welcome to the roundup here on Blood Bowl Live, your Monday night catch up for all of the last week's details of the ADBBL Season 8. We have got 14 games to go through this week as we get down to the countdown towards the end of the group stage. Some key fixtures getting in, some movements around the table. We'll have a look at all those games and how the table looks going into the last 2 weeks. Joining me this week, as always, we have Mr. Scott Bryant. Scott, good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Christopher Coe. How are you, sir?
Very good, thank you. Very good, very good. We
Excellent.
also have Mr. Tom Hovell with us. Tom, good evening.
Good evening. Happy New Year.
Yes, all that jazz. Happy New Year. And joining us this week, current reigning ADBBL champion with his Amazon team, taking the Chorfs into this season and taking it by storm, sitting nicely in the top 4 places at the moment in the ABC. It is none other than Mr. Tom Huns. Tom, thank you so much for coming along.
Thanks for bringing me on. Yeah, got some games to cover.
You do have a couple of games to cover, yeah, that we'll get to those as we move forward. I'll be interested to see kind of later on how you're finding Chorfs, particularly compared to Amazons. But we'll cover that in a second. We've got a lot of games to get through this week, so we're going to dive straight in. And the first game that we've got this week is the Hillbilly Howlers versus the Ross Bay Riptides. A 1-1 draw here for Chaos Chosen versus Khorne. Pretty even across the board, 9 SPP each. More injuries coming for the Chaos Chosen side. 2 teams with probably slow start but varying seasons here. And I'm trying to think who this is. A game happening in your guys' group with coaches that you may or may not have faced or have to face. Tom, we'll come to you first because Tom Huns, sorry, we'll come to you first just on this one. It's going to be so confusing having 2 Tom H's. We'll get there.
Yeah.
I'll just call you Huns and Hovell. Huns, you've played Simon this season, I believe, with his Chaos Chosen. Am I right in thinking that you've played him this season?
No, but I've played him like every other season before that, pretty much.
Oh,
For
okay.
like the past 3 seasons.
So
I have, Chris. I've played them both.
You've played them both. Oh, okay, cool. Well, either way, Hans, I've come to you anyway. James has had like a slower start to the season, but is still in with a bit of a shout, but probably needs results to go his way now. Considering Simon's season, do you think this is missed points maybe for the Khorne team?
I mean, maybe, but James got off to like quite a rough start with his first games of the season. I think like one of his strength 4s died and another player died. So he's been kind of like, he's slowly recovered from that like strength 4 loss and he's come back to get some results. And I think he's done pretty well. But yeah, I think he should probably be getting the 3 points, but I wouldn't be upset with a draw. I say that. I would be. I am.
You are. Yeah, I mean, we have to shout out James, possibly one of the nicest looking teams of the season. If you haven't seen them, with the kind of surfer themed shark corn gores are phenomenal. They look amazing. Mr. Hovell, Simon possibly happy with a draw here, but not overly helping his position. He's looking at the bottom 4 at the minute. Maybe needs some better results to claw out of there, which is good for you because you're kind of in a similar position near that bottom end of the table. So do you think Simon would be happy with a draw in this one?
Yeah, I think so, especially when he's taken on 2 journeymen as well. So it was at the start of the game, we're looking very much kind of James's game to lose. And yeah, I think Simon came off better, even though it is a draw, especially like I say, because he's got the 2 journeymen. But James has been one of those ones that have been quite quiet actually throughout the whole season. He's had a bit of a bad start as Tom's mentioned there, but he's slowly picking up speed, and he's currently sitting quite comfortably in the middle of the table. So I don't know how many games he's got left, but he could still come knocking at the door of 4th maybe, because from 4th to 7th in our division is all equal 11 points.
It is looking very, very close. The top half of both. There does kind of look like there's a bit of a clear line in both divisions now, but both top halves are looking pretty scary. Yeah, I think both coaches probably glad to get points, but wishing that they had had more. Looking at Simon probably hoping not to finish in the bottom four, and James hoping to claw his way into the top four. Scott, you've played both of these coaches. Do you think James can get his way into the top four? It will be by the skin of his teeth. I think he needs to go unbeaten to do it. Is it a possibility?
I think it's very much a possibility. James does definitely, as we've all alluded to, been gaining momentum as the season's been going on with his surfboards. Simon, interestingly, in this match, he's up to 3 re-rolls. When he first started the season, he only had the 1 re-roll, so therefore he could start with 4 chosen blockers, which was a really brave decision. Maybe that momentum has been, or that lack of momentum has been come back just to hamper him slightly. But then if you look at his first 3 matches, they were defeats, but only by 1 score. So, yeah, difficult one, especially when you're playing against, you've got Elliot in there. You've got also as well Jamie and the Dwarfs in the last couple of matches as well. So difficult match for everybody. I think those are the guys, as mentioned, on paper, bookies' favourites slightly would have been James ahead. And I think, a good solid performance by both coaches, but maybe a couple of points left on the pitch from James.
Well done to James and Simon. I think it's going to be tough for both coaches to get out of the grouping of 4 that they're currently in, but we'll see what their last games have for them when we come to them. We will move straight along. Scott, we're going to stick with you actually, because you were the Dark Elf stand-in coach for a 2-1 loss against the Vampires, 2-1 victory for John, rounding out his season with a very, very impressive 22 out of 24 points, 7 wins and a draw in this group stage. I mean, with these standing games, these standing games are always a little bit tricky because you're not playing a team that you're used to. It's always a tricky situation. Looking at the casualties alone, you didn't exactly let John get away with this completely free of any issues.
No, I knew that the first time I played Delves in a competitive environment. I knew that John's, his vampires, particularly his positionals, are very skilled up. So if I had a chance, I wanted to, try and see off all of his thralls, which is a pretty, has been historically an effective thing to do. That's why I took Morg, I took Helmet as well, and I also had added an assassin to the team roster as well. So I thought, if we're going to go for line 8, let's go for line 8. And yeah, it was working quite well. Morg was having an absolute best day, one of the days to tell the grandkids about. He really did put a lot of casualties there as well. John decided to receive because I've got Helmet, and I was expecting him to try and get an early touchdown, which he did after turn 3. Helmet didn't come back, hence the sending off. But then it just, continued to put the pressure on, made one mistake, had a block, a 2-dice block on a vampire with a lineman. And of course, it was a skull and a both down, re-roll it, skull and a both down. John sacked the ball carrier, hadn't put it in safety, and went to 2-0. So second half, it was all about trying to claw it back. I did at one point get John down to 4 vampires and a thrall, and that was it on the table. But John, I wasn't able to force that last touchdown. Every single time went for a blitz, either got a stumble or got a block. And of course, when you're playing blodgers in John's vampires, very difficult indeed. But a really fun match, a lot of casualties as well. So very entertaining. Apologies to all the other coaches in that division that I wasn't able to stop John's reign of terror. Do you like what I did there?
You very well done. Very well done, sir. We'll note that to the Netflix executives if they're watching. Mr. Huns, you've played vampires yourself. John's built a slightly terrifying vampire team here, to put it bluntly.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. How much of a miss? He's running with 6 vampires. He's not running with the Vargeist, but he is now only going to be running with one of his 2 runners when he gets into the playoffs. How much is he going to miss that extra vampire there? Does he need to kind of do something to prepare for that, or should 5 be enough going into the next round?
I mean, missing out on the runners, like, it's a bludger, so it's a big miss, but he's got another one that's better than that runner. I mean, when I ran vampires, the runner was probably my best player, but with all the skills he's got on everyone else and the re-rolls and the pro everywhere, it doesn't really make that much of a difference, because I think he's like, because I only ran like 4 vampires when I played vampires, or 4 on a Vargeist, and he's running like 5, but they're all blodge, they're all pro. It shouldn't be that big of a deal, to be honest. And then when it comes back, it'll be even worse for everyone. So I think it'll be fine.
It's also not too bad on his opponents when it comes to inducements. I mean, it's 140 less that he's giving away than he would have been, because he was comfortably the most valued team in the league. So that's not going to be too bad. Mr. Hovel, is John, I mean, to me, looking at everyone's rosters and everyone's performances so far, to me, John is the coach to stop winning his third ADBBL title. Is there anyone else that we think is currently looking better than him to get that?
Not at the moment, I don't think. Although now his current team, and I think he's obviously played another game this week as well, has he? Or was this the only game he played this week?
I think this was game 8.
This is
game 8.
his last
game. Well, he's This is interesting because he's actually got 11 players now. The 5 of which, as you say, yes, he's out with a runner, but he's also got a blitzer in there with nothing, with no extra skills. So he's only got 11 players, and nearly half of them are vampires, which I know from lovely experience that they can bloodlust quite often. So his next game is going to be an interesting one, considering that he's got that balance of probability of losing quite a few players off his team quite early on, depending on dice rolls. So even though, he is miles ahead of everyone and has built a formidable team, there is a slight chink in that armor. So it's not completely a clear run for him, in my opinion.
All I'd say, Tom, is expect to see several more thralls coming into the camp as well. That's what John said. It's a good thing to call out, because you look at it and on paper, exactly as you said, it is on paper there today overbalanced with vampires. But he's got the treasury, so expect to see at least a couple more thralls appear.
Yeah, he'd get 4 more if he wanted to, and then he'd be on 15 players.
Yeah,
I imagine he'll get at least 2, and then maybe sit on the remaining 90k, just in case he loses a vampire after his next game. But yeah, looking in a very strong position, John. Looking like the coach to beat. Moving on to our next game, we're sticking with vampires against Nurgle. We've got a 2-0 victory for the Suffolk Suckers versus the Inglorious Pustards here. 2-0 on the cash for the Pustards. A win that the vampires very much needed. They are still in the hunt for a top 4 space in the NBC, because again, it's very tight. Within the top 10 coaches, any of that top 10 could still make the top 4. It's very, very, very close indeed. Andy's looking pretty good this season. He's had kind of some mixed results, but he's still got enough games left. This is probably, Scott, a result we may be looking at the form of the 2 coaches. Probably could have seen this one coming. Points that Andy needed, because his next 3 games are 3 difficult games for Andy. So he probably needed to get these points in just to keep him on track.
Yeah, this was more of a must-win for Andy than it was for Nick. Although we know, having seen the season so far, in a game of Blood Bowl, you cannot, nothing is a gimme. You've still got to go out. You've still got to play the opposition in front of you. So as a result of that, I think Andy has done very well. He needed the win. He set himself up now. He didn't get that first touchdown until towards the end of it, turn 12. so he was facing a really tricky situation. A lot of casualties coming through from the Pustards as well. Good old Legion and good old Clostridium Carl doing very well indeed in terms of putting more and more pressure on the Suffolk Suckers. But Andy did well, put himself in a good position, ready for his last few games.
Nick is now has played all his games. We've got one more game of Nick's to go through, which we will jump to next. It's not at this point. Nick's season's probably not changing. It's looking like it's going to be the bottom 4 playoff for him. Andy with a lot more to play for going into this one. Mr. Hovel, Andy's team is again, it's another vampire team where he's getting the right skills in the right places. It's not quite to the level of John's is, but he's getting block everywhere he needs it. He's got dodge on one of his runners. Has he got enough here? Because he's coming up against Lizardmen, he's coming up against Chaos Chosen, and he's coming up against Orcs. He's coming up against 3 quite physical teams in his next 3 games, and he needs to win all 3 of them in order to get that last place in the top 4. Has he the team to do it, or has his team not skilled up quick enough, do you think?
Oh, that's difficult, isn't it? Because they are some very difficult teams to play against. And it's an interesting one, because I'd be interested to know whether that Vargeist has actually played much of a role in his games. From the couple of times I've played with a Vargeist, I've always found them quite a bit naff, to be honest. And whether or not you get rid of the Vargeist for either a vampire, maybe a blitzer, or bring in, say, some star player if he's going to have the points, a differentiator against the other teams. Difficult one to tell, really. But like you say, he's got some great skills on the ones he's got in there. So he's all block and a blodge runner, which is going to be definitely the main scoring threat against those next 3 games.
Mr. Hans, what about you? Do you think he's got enough here to get through those three games and maybe get top 4, or is he looking sort of 5 to 8, probably more realistic?
I mean, with that vampire team, it's pretty good. I mean, blodge runner, block thrower. It's a good there's a good lot of skills in there, and it's definitely worth looking into a redraft. But the teams that he's got to play against, I'm just not sure. I think Harry's Orcs, I think they're probably going to make it into the top 4. I think they can definitely go there. So I'm not sure. It'll be a tight game, but Harry fucking smashed me with his Orcs when we did the 3rd place playoff when I played Vampires, and we basically had the same team, me and this Vampires coach at that point, basically the same skills on it, and he destroyed me. So I don't know. It might be rough.
Harry and Rich as 2 of his next opponents is going to be a tough couple. But best of luck to Andy, and sticking with Nick for his game against the Plague Brigade. Sadly, not one that went his way. A 3-0 win for the Skaven team here. Again, getting the best on the casualties as well, which they've done quite well with this season with that Rat Ogre. Mr. Hans, we'll stick with you. This Skaven team have done very well this season, having taken a very early beating and still managed to survive. Are you? Because I'm trying to think back of kind of teams that you've played, and I've not seen you play something maybe as agile as a Skaven team. It appears he can just do whatever he needs to with. He only needs a couple of them, but that's maybe comes with the territory.
Yeah, I mean, I've played against Skaven a couple of times. I've played against Scots Skaven, but I've never played them myself. But they definitely seem like it really doesn't matter how many players you have left on the pitch. You can always score with at least 2. So they're never really out of the game, to be honest, unless you're having a really bad day with luck and dice rolls. They can pretty much do whatever they want. And if you're not breaking their armor as well, then they're just unbeatable. They're just not playable. If they're out casualtying you, that's when you know that you're going to have a bad game. You've got to get them off the board.
it's been the case a couple of times with this play brigade as well that they have managed to outcash the opponent. Mr. Hovel, you've famously said that anyone can win 4-0 with Skaven.
There you go.
We'll get that on t-shirts at some point. Um,
Proof. There you go. Done.
um,
Yeah.
looking at Carl in the chat, he's saying that at one point all of the gutter runners were pinned with tentacles and by bloaters, and I think it sounds like fortunately got 2 blitzes in this game, which would have very much helped him. By the sounds of kind of all of the strength and the tentacles that Nick's team has and all the mutations, he's done really well to come out of this with only the one casualty.
Yeah, absolutely. And equally, I think that dead one actually came back to life, didn't it? Not? Is that little star thing, injury +1, dead on turn 10, the rotter?
No, that's a dead. That's a dead one.
That's a dead one.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
a dead
okay.
one.
Yeah, well, that's interesting then. Yeah, so I think it's interesting because this is a team which actually now has a reroll, but has famously had no rerolls most of the season as well, and also randomizes all its skills. So it's one of those interesting teams. It's very slow but quite bashy with a lot of things. So as I say, it was interesting to see that they've got only 1 dead, and in fact, there's hardly any injuries on the Skaven side as well, which is a very interesting kind of concept because, as you've all mentioned, it kind of sometimes swings one of both ways. It's either lots of dead rats or a high score.
Scott, a quick word on Nick then. I think this was his last game. He's finishing in the bottom 4. He's this season. He's got the team look incredible, and it's been so great to have him playing with us this season because we weren't sure whether he would take part. Last minute, he did decide he wanted to. Such a nice coach and such a fun coach to play against.
Wholeheartedly. Nick is one of the reasons, he brings a lot of colour to our community. And yeah, it's just wonderful to see him back, rolling some dice and having a chat and a smile and a laugh in store as well. So a big thank you, Nick, and look forward to seeing and hopefully playing you next year as well. But just finishing off with Carl, you said earlier, Chris, he had an early beating. I think he had several early beatings. And then in terms of his last few matches, to get the 1-1 draws against the Creedies and against Harry as well. Then to get, we talked about this last week. He had the 3-1 win with 1 gutter runner against the top hat. And against the Inglorious Pustars, as Tom, both Toms were alluding to, with Skaven, if you get on the roll, if you do get the blitzes going for you, plus of course you get the blitz kickoff events as well, difficult to stop. They can score from anywhere, and they're very, very entertaining. And we're starting to see that momentum really behind Carl and these rats. So well done, both coaches.
We will move on to our next game, and hey, the coach is in the room. Mr. Hans, we're on your game versus the Wild Jets Berserkers here. Chaos Dwarfs versus regular Dwarfs, a 1-0 victory for the Chaotic Storm, the Chaos Storm. Are they the Chaos Storm or the Chaotic Storm? I've only just noticed that your logo has something different to your team name. Either way,
when I made the logo, I didn't decide on the name yet.
Okay,
so it's just kind of like that.
Fair enough. Why don't you? You took a bit of a beating casualty-wise here, but you've got the 3 points out the end. Why don't you let us know how this went?
Yeah, the start to the game was quite lucky for me. Jamie failed to pick up the ball 3 times with the blodging runner, so I literally just walked my centaur down there, rush, blitz the ball carrier, pick up the ball, score. And I made an early 1-0 lead. But then after that, I thought I could get the ball again. I was like, okay, I'm going to try to get the ball again. Oh, what's that? A blocker? Oh, it's dead. Flamesmith? Oh, it's dead. Centaur, niggling injury, you're gone. And he just kept destroying my team. I was left with like 6 players at the end of the first half. Got a couple knockouts back. I wanted to try score again, but I was like 4 or 5 players down at that point. So I was like, I'm going to have to do the unimaginable. Stall in my own half. Dirty play, but it worked. Yeah, so I had to do that. And yeah, it was a it was a tight game, and I got smashed on the casualties. I didn't get an armor break for the first half, and I got a knockout turn 15, and that was about it.
So, out of interest, how much did the weather impact it? I can't imagine that either. I mean, Jamie, we've seen Jamie before doing 6-up passes and all this ridiculous stuff. So it's not outside of the realms of possibility. But I'm guessing probably not much of an impact. It doesn't pick up. It's more on the kind of passing side. Probably not something you really worried about when it came up.
No, when we saw it came up, we just both laughed. Neither of us were going to be passing that game. Yeah, so it didn't really have any effect.
Awesome. Scott and Tom, any questions for Mr. Huns on this impressive dwarf defense?
How just generally on your Chorfs, Tom? We've spoken about this, and I know you were looking forward to the Chorfs making their official appearance in Blood Bowl, not just as a team of legend. What's your general take on them in terms of your first season, strengths, weaknesses, and how would you rate them to last year's in terms of not necessarily style, but in terms of how you've picked them up? Are they easy to learn? And what are the pros and cons quickly versus your last two teams, Amazons and obviously Vampires?
I mean, I think they're fairly okay to learn, but if you I wouldn't pick them as a first team if you're starting out with Blood Bowl, because it's just a lot of stuff to manage. It's a lot of stuff to think about. If you don't have guard and you're facing a team with more than 3 strength 4s, you basically are probably going to lose, because they really just can't do anything without guard, is what I found. The Centaurs are great, but sometimes Chorfs just feel like a tier 2 team, and it's really weird because it's the ball carriers are either an agility 4, strength 4, which is good because it's movement 9, but then if it doesn't get the ball and you're playing against a fast team, they're just going to take the ball and run away. So you've got to use the linemen, but the linemen are literally, they're just thralls. Hate thralls. And you've got to pick up the ball with them and score. I mean, the Flamesmiths are okay. I mean, they're basically just there to take hits. But the Dwarf Blockers are great. The Centaurs are great. They're an all-round good team, but you've got to learn positioning a lot because they're very slow, except from the Centaurs. And then the linemen can just die at any hit because they're armor 8 as well.
Yeah, and sorry, just before Tom jumps in there, last question I've got as well, in terms of how you've played them this season, this was a match where you didn't have Bomber. You've been playing Bomber Dribbles not a lot this season. Was he the difference that you were missing against Jamie, or again, was it just there was give and take for both coaches? As you mentioned, Jamie failed the pickups, he almost, wouldn't say pitch cleared you, but he gave you a lot of injuries to think about as well. So does Bomber give the Chorfs that X factor they miss out of the box?
He can, but you'll see in the last game that I have, 8th game, I don't think I'm going to be running him anymore.
Okay.
he almost lost me that entire game just by being an idiot.
So we love Bomber.
he can help out smash teams. He's really good at if you get the ball on the ball carrier, you basically got to rely on them to catch it. Well, at least that's what I think now from what happened in my 8th game, to blow him up. It worked good against Tom quite well. I managed to blow up his cage, get the ball.
Yeah.
But in the game later, it just went horrible. So I don't think I'll be running him anymore. I'd rather take a wild drummer now.
How useful is the Flamesmith? Have you found that a useful player, or is it kind of a bit of a new skill but not great?
I mean, I used it. I think I used it against Jamie once, and I got a 6. Did the arm roll. It's just when it comes up, it's funny, but it's never going to do anything. It's good against heavy strength 4 teams when you don't have guards starting out, because you can just try and get the strength 4 down and mark it with it, and then when it gets back up, you breathe fire. But once you've got guard, you kind of just don't need it. It's only good for just eating a hit, but the Dwarf Blockers are better at that because they've got iron hard skin.
We will come to your next game a little bit later on. A good win in this one, a good 3 points against the Dwarfs, who are also looking very strong. We'll look at the table later to see who can get where. We will move on to a beautiful. Actually, before we move on to the core mirror match, there was a question in the chat that I thought I would quickly answer before I forget to get to it, which is from Elliot. If someone can't finish all their games and has to drop out, does that mean they immediately would go to the bottom 4 regardless of points? If somebody if somebody drops out, and I know we've got a couple of people who have dropped out in either league, yet we will shuffle them down to the bottom of the order, so that could bump someone up into another playoff, depending on where they sit and where they land. So yeah, we will do a little bit of bumping and shifting when we get to that point, but we will figure that out exactly once the group stages come to an end. Yes, a corn mirror match then. Ross Bay Riptides versus the Boulders Bowlers. We've got someone who's been in every single season of the ADBBL versus someone in their very first season, and it looks like it wasn't entirely plain sailing for for James, the veteran here, but a 2-1 victory coming out of it in the end. 13 SPP get from this game, a even score here on the casualty front as well. Scott, coming to you first then. I believe you've again played both of these coaches in your run this season. How did you find them kind of different within their play style? Was there much different in the way that you faced each of these coaches, or was it just kind of experience that led it one way or another?
Experience is the key word here, Chris. I think both coaches play a very similar game. They really play to the strengths for Corn in terms of, to use the cliche, blood for the blood god. So they're really both in terms of good, solid, punchy teams. They're trying to, outdo each other. But for me, this was a reflection of just that experience level. Owen's first season, he's had a really good season. He's learning. He learns, he adapts very quickly, and was in store at the same time this was happening. And even, when James, he took an early touchdown. Then he took his second touchdown, which actually came about from a random 5-up catch after a ball scatter as well. So Owen was doing all the right things. He was getting his blocks in. He was getting his blitzes in at the right moment. But the ball, even as James admitted to, didn't bounce or didn't scatter in his direction at all. James did it, got back into it. So even after turn 12 going, 2-0 down, which again, that could have gone any other way. So there were opportunities for both coaches. So on another day, this was the sort of match we think we've all been in here, guys. We've all played these matches where they're a 1-0 or a 2-1 win for one coach, but with the dice going maybe only a 1 or 2 key rolls going the other way, it could have been a 1 or a 2-1 or even a draw for the in favor of the other coach as well. So it was a really close match. I think it was the experience factor for James, and he was rocking a sophisticated new haircut, which I think put off the opposition coach as well. So that didn't help. But a good game, James continuing to get in the win, and hopefully we'll see Owen back next year. He's played some very good Blood Bowl with this Corn team.
Never underestimate the power of a haircut to bamboozle your opponent. Mr. Hovel, then. Mirror matches are always slightly odd ones because you know exactly what's coming up against you because you're playing it yourself week in, week out. But even with a team like Corn, people can have slightly different styles. Is it a bonus, a mirror match, because you know what to face, or because you know the weaknesses and the strengths? Is it a bit of a double-edged sword? How do you manage it?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I don't really know Corn that well, and I was surprised when looking at this and thinking, you got 130k in inducements. Why do you not take a star player and go for a team mascot? I'm just doing a quick look. They're very short on low costing star players, the Corn team. You've literally only got Acorn the Squirrel at 80k and Max Spleen Ripper at exactly 130k. So I didn't realize that for a start. So I assume that's why he went for the mascot and the extra team training. But I may have thought of just going for pure carnage and just taking Max to try and slaughter them very, very quickly, because he did take it till turn 8 to score the first touchdown. which, by the looks of things, it was quite a light casualty game. There's only 2 casualties, one either side. So maybe in hindsight, taking that star player and taking a little bit more of a risk might be worth it next time.
So off the back of that, then, Mr. Huns, we'll come to you. Off the back of that, do Corn need a star player in a situation like this where you've got kind of this mirror match setup? Do they kind of, if you've got he had 130 there in inducements, would you have stuck with the extra reroll like he went for? Would you have brought the star player in? How would you have kind of approached it?
I mean, because Max Spleen Ripper's a chainsaw, I probably wouldn't have brought him either, because if you just roll a 1, he's probably out of the game permanently because he just chainsaws himself. But yeah, I probably would have went with the reroll, because the only time I've played Corn, I hated it because I just get both down, have to waste all my rerolls on it because they start out with no block, and then with all the frenzy hits that they're going to get as well, they're just going to get more hits, more chances of getting bad rolls on the block. But I think once they get blocked, they are really menacing. Like, they are very good. And yeah, I just I feel a bit bad for Owen because it's like it's his first season, and he's played against me, Elliot, James, Scott. Like, he's played against very experienced coaches for all of his games. It's just it's just been rough. But he's gotten very good, to be fair. He's definitely learned the game quite well.
Yeah.
It is a trial by fire. And I think we've said it quite a lot that it can suck quite a lot when you're you're just constantly coming up against these great coaches and you're taking an absolute beating, but it's absolutely the quickest way to learn. So he'd have picked up so much more in those 4 games than maybe he would have done against sort of other opponents. So well done to James then, continuing the results that he needs in order to try and get him to where he needs to be in the table. Hard luck for Owen, but a few games left to play, so there are more points for him to get as the season continues. We move on then, and we land ourselves at the Atomic Cherry Bombs. Scott, we're in your hometown now. 3-1 win against the Norse team, 3-2 on casualties. And going into this game, your last game of the season, this one.
Yep.
And I believe you needed the win here to guarantee you that space in the top 4. The win is what you've got. Well done, sir. How did it come about?
Painfully, that's how it came about, Chris, and brutally, thanks to JD. He did beat me and gave me flashbacks of the previous 2 matches. So prior to the previous 2 matches, I think I was casualties. I wasn't top of the list. Now I'm up to something like 22 casualties against. So it's been a very painful experience, and JD continued that with some style. So the casualties are one, and the tree, he wasn't as poor as he'd been against the previous 2 coaches, so Phil and James, but yeah, still wasn't particularly great. Facing Cindy again, I thought was in for a long, painful afternoon. A bit of good fortune. Cindy fumbled the first bomb that JD went for. He went for the double bomb to start with, because I'd broken through. I thought I'd go for the early touchdown, so therefore Cindy can go. She, though, did me a favour and dropped the bomb to knock out several players, including herself. Then she got sent off. I took advantage. JD tried to break through. I took advantage of a sack, got the ball, went up and scored at the end. So 2-0 at half time, thinking, okay, this isn't too bad. However, just at the end of the first half, JD actually injured my tree, as you can see there. So he took out the full tree. So kudos for him for doing that with a Norse lineman. And then as we went through the second half, it just felt it was deja vu. I was getting knocked out, injured again. And then when my thrower, who I've taken 2 seasons to build up, decided to go for a pass, and it was, all I had to do was, not get a double 1. And of course, what did she roll? A double 1. So that 1 in 36 bit me. So dropped the ball. And rightly so, JD came around and punched her in the face. And as you can see, she got injured. And if you can see what the stat bust was, because I'd already used my APOC to save my one of my runners. So now I've got a -1 passing elf. Lovely, just what you need, and misses next game. So yeah, Nuffle wasn't smiling. He was smiling, but not for me. So it was a very brutal one. Lots more, and if you speaking to JD and to Scott Creedy, that was closer than a 3-1 suggests. So I did manage to get the ball, did manage to get it away, and then score that third touchdown. But it was a brutal match. It really, really was. It could have gone either way. And the last 3 matches have really proved, yes, you can win with elves even when you get most of your players off the pitch, but it's not an easy thing to do. And especially in the season when you have a lot of casualties, they do build up.
Mr. Hans, pretend that Scott is not in the room right now. It would be unfair not to ask this question, because we've looked at John Reeder's team, we've looked at the skills he's got there. We've said that he's definitely one of the coaches that I think we've got to watch that could be our champion. Scott is guaranteed top 4 now. You look at some of these skills he has on some of those players, and although he's missing that thrower, there's some very good players there. Could this be Scott's season?
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, out of all the teams that are in both sides of the division, there's really only 2 teams that I can actually see winning the whole thing, and that's Scott's and John's. They're the ones with like the build, the skills. They're definitely ready to smash people just with big score lines. They've got everything they need. Whereas some other teams are still like building up on their skills. So I think it'll be either of those 2 to win the league for me.
Well done. Kiss of death there, Scott.
Gee, thanks, Tom.
Mr. Hovell, before we go on to the next game, John is missing a runner. Scott is missing a thrower. The Orphic Gladiators are missing their Rat Ogre. Game 8 is proving a little bit deadly for some of these good teams. Good news for any coach who's looking to face one of them.
Yeah, I think we mentioned this in previous episodes, this whole idea that some of these teams have got some very, very good players. Scott's thrower, it looks like a phenomenal player with leader, cannoneer, sure hands and block. And as you mentioned, others now. It's that idea that others that really don't have much to kind of play for anymore, and maybe not looking to carry on with the team the next season, could really be a thorn in some of these team sides now. And it looks like it unfortunately came home to roost for you, Scott. One little thing though, I'm interested to know, you got Juggernaut on your Treeman. Did you put that on after this game?
Yeah, and it was a mistake. Chose the wrong one. Wasn't paying attention when I clicked it. I wanted to get either Brawler or a Guard. I was going to go for Guard, and I clicked Juggernaut instead. So, yeah, I've now got a blitzing tree. Great. But no, I decided to go for it. So I've randomized all my linemen, which you do. I did randomize a catcher. Okay, diving catch, which does give you obviously the 1 extra square in terms of taking a catch if it's inaccurate, but also does give you +1 on the catch as well, which means if you are in a tackle zone, does give you a bit of extra. So yeah, all that. And I've made sure I've got the reroll, because I had enough to stat bust that War Dancer. And I rolled on the water on the table. I didn't get Edge as an option. I could have gone +1 movement or +1 armor. So I didn't get strength. I wanted to be a +1 edge. But because I was missing my thrower as well, and I was losing that leader reroll, I thought I'll go for leader. Strip ball, tackle, and leader on a War Dancer isn't too bad. So yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Nice.
Well done, Scott. Top 4 secure. It sounds like a like you said, closer game than 3-1 would indicate. Phil's in the chat saying JD was so close to scoring a second, it was very tense.
Yep.
So well done to JD for giving Scott a run for his money here, but a good result for the Wood Elves. We will move on. We still have 7 games left to go, so let's start flying through them. We've got the Dead Star Belgrave versus the Top Hat Society. A 3-0 win, but 3-3 on the casualties here for the Shambling Undead team. 2 teams, a very important result, this one for 2 teams, both of them needing the win in order to continue a push to the top 4. Top 4 now looking out of reach for the Chaos Dwarfs, but the Shambling Undead get the result that they need. They've still got a maximum of 16 points available to them for the whole group stage, so they need a win in all of their games to make that top 4 a reality. Mr. Hans, coming to you first then. Dave with a very, very strong result here. It's his 3rd season with this Shambling Undead team. I believe you've played this Shambling Undead team in a previous season, but I might be wrong with that. You may have played a different one of Dave's teams, but he is looking pretty strong. He just needs to continue this run of wins.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, to be honest, the only thing that really went wrong for Dave this season is just the start. I think he got picked up 2 losses. That's pretty much. Other than that, he's played brilliantly, and he's clawed his way back really well, back into the top 4. It's just the question now of, is everyone else that's competing for top 4 going to get the results they need to get above him? Because I think there's a couple players that can get above him potentially, but they need to win back-to-back games like Dave has been doing as well. So good result. I mean, he's got a great team, and I think if he gets in the top 4, he could also do quite well.
Mr. Hovel, every win is crucial, especially at this late stage. Like Tom said there, so many coaches now needing back-to-back wins here. Dave is looking in a very strong position. He's stuck with the same team for 3 seasons. He is looking like he can do it, but he still needs results to go his way elsewhere, which is going to be tough.
Yeah, and it's interesting that that Harry didn't get kind of more kind of casualties and stuff, especially when he's taking Hathak the Unstoppable, because on paper that star player looks immense. Strength 6 with that special skill that they can just basically re-roll a single block dice every time they blitz. So it's very interesting that, as far as I can see, he played no real part in the game. I would literally have been throwing him at everyone to see if he could actually do some damage there. So I think it's a bit unfortunate that the dice just didn't roll well, unfortunately. And also, to add insult to injury, Dave gained himself a new lineman because of the dead Chaos Dwarf blocker.
Scott, a bit of a mixed season for Harry then. He's had to play, looking at the opponents that he's faced in his 6 games, he's played a real mix of some very, very good coaches there. He's had some real highlights with his vampire game and then some real difficult games here. A tough season, especially coming into it with a team that is kind of although it's been around for a while, officially very new. Really kind of he's getting everything this season.
Yeah, it's definitely been a learning curve for Harry in this season. As you said, this is his 2nd season. He was in season 6, wasn't it season 7? So season 8 is just his 2nd outing, new team. I know he's been looking forward to playing the Dwarves. Some fine top hats on all his players, and he's come up against some really good coaches as well. As we've mentioned, as Tom, Mr. Hovel mentioned there, the dice have been against him some of the times as well. But as Mr. Hand said as well, he was up in this match against Mr. Dave Rue. Dave knows his way exceptionally well around a Blood Bowl pitch. So, yeah, hopefully we'll see Harry back with an improved Chaos Dwarf team and a skilled up Dwarf team next year. And, Dave is very much in the mix and going to cause, he's going to have an influence on the outcome of this championship, no doubt.
Carl in the chat saying Top Hats have had the best journeyman of the season in his last game. We'll get to that game shortly, and we will see how his journeyman performed there. But we are back to the. I have just gone on the right one, haven't I? Yes, I have. We are back to the Dark Elf stand-in. This time played by Phil, coach of the Gilded Knights of Cerulean. But a 4-2 victory for the Skaven team. 3-0 on the casualties. Another strong casualty showing from this Skaven roster here. Scott, we'll come straight back to you as our resident Skaven expert. A really interesting game here. You've played Skaven. You've also played these Dark Elves in stand-ins. Two very good agile teams here. The Skaven team should on paper be the one that is the squishier, and just didn't happen here.
No, the Skaven are definitely on a roll at the moment. I think when you've got that momentum behind you, it makes the game so much easier as well. Phil did very well, took that, despite obviously this has all been registered onto a play after the event. Phil did actually take a 1-0 lead. Carl got it back to 1-1. It could have gone 2-1 to the Dark Elf straight away. But for a few dice rolls, a few missed blocks, and all of a sudden when the ball goes loose, it's nothing really for a gutter runner to dodge in, and whether it's a 2 up, 3 up, 4 up, even a 5 up pickup, and get out of there and score quickly. So it was the Skaven pulled away. It was 4-1 at one stage, and then it came back to 4-2 at the end. Ominous for Carl. He's playing very well. He's taken these rats, and they're really, I think, he seems to be really enjoying playing them as well. So well done, Carl.
Mr. Hovel, sir. Carl's run of form has just come at the worst point, really. He's on a really impressive run just at the end, just as he's run out of games to get more points. This win put him into the top 4 on 12, but immediately coaches are going to start digging away at him. He's got a lot of people who can get more points than that. A good sign if we see the Plague Brigade for a third season that he's building up some momentum.
Absolutely. And until Scott just mentioned that this had all been put onto Tour Play afterwards, I was going to say, if I was Carl, I'd screenshot that and print it out and put it on my wall. That just looks a very impressive stat of just like touchdown, 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 touchdown. But no, that's it's really good to see this team kind of come to its fore, because previous seasons and the beginning of this season, they really have had a tough time. They've had to delve quite deep into the sewers to keep pulling out new linemen and new rats every 5 minutes, because every game he'd been playing previously, he'd been losing at least 1 or 2 rats. Now that he's got that quite a good team on paper with block and wrestle and actually 2 blocks, 1 wrestle and 1 mighty blow as well, with the 3 gutter runners and a blitzer, which is a nice looking kind of way of playing. Plus also that thrower's got block. So there's some interesting things in here. Equally, he's got a line rat on Dauntless as well. So I highly suspect this team, this is not the last time we'll see this team, and they'll be back for the next season.
Yeah.
Mr. Huns, it's a very impressive kind of score here for the Skaven team. Up there sort of with kind of one of the best kind of comebacks with the kind of string of results that he's managed to put together. 2 very high edge teams here. Are you tempted by another edge season? If you class Amazons as an edge season, are you tempted by some edge too? Some gutter runners, some rats?
No.
Elves even? No?
only edge team I'm interested in are vampires, and they're only half edge. So if I came back to do an edge team, it would probably be vampires, unless like high elves come out, because I literally only play new teams now. Play good ones.
Fair enough. A very good result here for the Skaven team. Thank you to Phil for being the stand-in. And just to make it abundantly clear, Phil, I am aware of your shenanigans with the player called Chris. I have not forgotten about it, and I will have my revenge. Moving on to the next game then. Clueless Crusaders, we're coming to you, Mr. Hovel. A 2-1 victory here for the Dwarf team. I feel like I was next to you when you were playing this game. I don't know if I would have necessarily called it as a 2-1 victory to the Dwarves when this game was being played. It did look a bit like it could have gone either way. Why don't you tell us how this one unfolded?
Yeah, so it was an interesting game. It started off with pouring rain, which carried on for the entire match, which didn't make as much of a difference as I initially thought, because I thought, oh, there goes the passing game, but it didn't have too much of an issue. But I've never played against dwarfs, and interestingly, Jamie never played against humans. So we were both kind of at a bit of a learning curve. But I'd heard about this urban myth about dwarf dice, and straight off the bat, they proved correct, because my whole front line was just on the floor or knocked out or injured on the first turn. So I was already 3 players down on turn 1. And it was a real struggle to hold him off until turn 7 to actually score. However, I absolutely spawned it, really, because it was me to receive, and it was my turn 7, and it was a high kick. I got the ball. I was right on the line with my catcher, and I just legged it, absolutely legged it. Two blitzes either side, and I managed to score on turn 8. So it was even Stevens going into the game, into the second half. The second half was a real slog. It was backwards and forwards. The ball carriers on both sides were being hit. The ball was going all over the place. So that pouring rain was now coming into the fore, where it wasn't in the first half. And I just it got to a point where everyone was around the ball, and I thought, sod it, I'll run a halfling in. So I ran my halfling in to pick up the ball. It scattered probably about 12 times around on different people, multiple times different people were trying to catch it. And unfortunately, it went to Jamie's team on the better side. And then again, his dice started coming in, and he injured and took out my ogre. He injured my one of my good linemen, and he also killed my halfling. So there has been a bounty that is being received there, because I think there was a bounty out for any of the New Dice Please teams that have been injured or killed would receive a bounty. So yeah, well done, Jamie, on that. And then right at the last minute, he managed to get that dwarf blocker lineman, who had actually managed to catch the ball with all the shenanigans being passed around, and to score the touchdown. So shame, but I nearly held him to a draw.
Mr. Huns, what do you do against this dwarf team? Because so much guard everywhere, a lot of block everywhere, a lot of mighty blow in there as well. Especially when you're a team like humans, where you are maybe a little bit squishier. I mean, you're still armor 9, but you've got some armor 8s in there, some strength 2s in there. How do you combat this? Do you just not kind of meet them? Do you try and stand off from them? Is there anything particular that you should try and do against this dwarf team? Because it just looks like a wall that is almost impossible to get through.
Yeah, I mean, when I play Jamie, because I'm playing Chaos Dwarves, I just stood up and met him. But when you're playing as a team with like only one guard or no guard at all, you've pretty much just got to hope that they make like a slight positioning mistake and then just bank off of it and just completely take advantage of it. Because the only real thing you can do against dwarves when they have all that is just use the fact that you probably have more movement than them and better agility. So you've just got to go around them somehow. You want to try and get the dwarf runner before it actually makes a cage. Because what often dwarf players do is they're like, okay, I'm going to keep one dwarf runner up the pitch to pick up the ball. He'll get the ball. If he doesn't get the ball, go run after it, get it, because no one else is coming back to get it. And that's what I did. But when they get the ball and they manage to get into that cage, the only thing you can really do is just like stall and just start like slowly going backwards one square after one square. But once they start taking players out, they're just unstoppable, really.
Scott, a good result here for Jamie. He again, looking at his results, they have been sort of a bit more mixed. The results sort of that he's had this season, but he's strung a few wins together now. The possibility of top four is looking tricky, I think. But do you think that he can kind of claw it in, or is he going to kind of be a standout coach in that second bracket?
At the moment, I think it's looking more like a second tier bracket for Jamie as opposed to top four. I think it's going to depend on other results going his way. He's still got JD to play, and JD is, those Norse can be very, very brutal. I've just experienced myself as well. Just a kudos to Mr. Hovel as well. Yeah, to get in the rain, to get it back against so much guard. There was a lot of comments in chat on Twitch. So the game is on YouTube. Anybody who wants to go back and watch it. It just felt that the guard was just wearing the humans down, as Mr. Hovel mentioned as well. Sorry, Mr. Huns mentioned. Play when you've got so much guard against you, it's really, really difficult. And it just felt that whenever, and so to get back to 1-1 at halftime was good. But just to try and get over that line for that win as well, it just felt it was almost as if Tom had sort of slightly run out of puff, to use the phrase as well. But it was a close match. It was only on turn 16. Jamie scored as well. Is that enough for Jamie to get into the top four? At the moment, I'd say it's more difficult for Jamie than it is for other players in that top half.
Well done, Tom, and well done, Jamie. A very entertaining game. Feel free to go back and watch it, especially if you want a lesson on how to calculate who gets guard assists and who doesn't, because there was so much guard everywhere. There was sort of 5 or 6 of us around the table making sure it was calculated correctly. So it was a absolute mash of skills. So please do go back and watch it. Moving on to the next game then, and Mr. Huns, we are back with you with your 1-1 draw against the Necromantic Horror, played by Luke as our stand-in for the Necromantic Horror coach. 1-1, 2-0 on the casualties for the Necromantic Horror side, and a relatively spectacular equalizing touchdown coming at the end after some bomber shenanigans early on. Why don't you let us know how this one unfolded?
Yeah, so the first half really wasn't great. I mean, the first turn, I have Bomber throws a perfect bomb right on the ball carrier, literally straight on me. He's got a cage like in every single like corner space, so I can't get in. So I throw a bomb, perfect on the ball carrier. Ghoul Runner doesn't catch it. Scatters onto a flesh golem, doesn't catch it. Scatters onto my dwarf blocker, doesn't catch it. Scatters backwards towards me again. Ends up around 4 of my own players. It only hit 1, luckily. But then the very next turn, he did the exact same thing again, right on the cage. Could have hit 5 of Luke's players and the ball carrier. Ghoul Runner doesn't catch it. Scatters to a flesh golem again. Scatters onto 3 of my players. Casualties my own centaur. Badly hurt. Used the apothecary on it. Knocks out a hobgoblin. Third bomb, fumbles it. Knocks out another hobgoblin. And then he's just down. And then like later on, he threw 1 more bomb. Landed on the ball carrier. Both Ghoul Runners were next to each other. Landed on the Ghoul Runner. Scattered next to them. Didn't hit either of them. And Luke just stalled me out and scored. That was... I think if I didn't take Bomber, I probably would have been better off, to be honest. He completely lost me that first half. And then the second half was just, it was very tight. Luke did very well. I was trying to get players off the board, trying to just soak up players with some of my blockers, see how many I could mark up and then move. Eventually, Luke did a 4-up dodge with a flesh golem to 2 die splits my ball carrier with no rerolls left. Got it. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to do my own thing. And I do a 1 dice with a zombie, push something out of the way, 2 die splits the ball carrier, block it down. The ball scatters in front of the centaur. I was like, my other hobgoblin can't pick up the ball now. So I was like, okay, 5-up dodge, 5-up pickup, 5-up dodge, 4-up dodge. I had one reroll left, and I used it on like the second to last dodge. So I'm like, wow, if this works, that's actually quite funny. Like I think I deserved it because there was such a bad first half, and it was just best touchdown I've ever got. Really, I mean, yeah, great game.
It's so tough when you, especially when you've kind of got the inducements to take the start, even one like Bomber who is quite cheap. When he then does anything he can to work actively against you, and it's only really the likes of Bomber, like other than failing activations, it's the likes of Bomber and Cindy who are going to actively work against you and really make your life difficult. And it sounds like that's exactly what he did. If you were playing this game again, then would you still give Bomber a chance? Would you bother going for Bomber again? Is there kind of something, with the benefit of hindsight, is there something else you would have done?
I think I probably would have took a wild drummer because it basically just means that if Luke stalls me out, which he did, it might not happen if I didn't have Bomber, but if he managed to stall me out, I could maybe trick him into like he might not notice I've got the wild drummer. If I get 3 pushes, I might be able to get a crowd push because if I did have the wild drummer, that could have worked because that's how he set up when he stalled me out. But yeah, the wild drummer also could have just helped on the line in general, just moving wraiths out of the way and like so they have to sidestep backwards because they weren't able to go anywhere else. So that would have stopped him from getting a couple blocks with his only block pieces and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm not taking Bomber again. It's just it's not happening.
Is there any other star player who's taken your fancy you thinking could benefit this Chorf team, Tom? Someone like Skitter?
It depends what matchups. Like I've been looking at yours and John's teams to be honest to see like if I did get into the top 4, I think I'm probably going to place 4th because I think there's at least one other coach will probably be able to get above me just by looking at the table. And that means I'll have to play either a U2, and I've got no tackles, so I've definitely been looking at Skitter, and also I can't remember the name of the Hobgoblin star player, but he's also a stabber. He's like movement 7, so I've been looking at those two because those are the ways that I'm gonna probably have to deal with all the blodge.
Yeah.
Oh, Rashnak, backstabber.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, he's pretty deep.
Mr. Hovel, you're our resident necromantic horror coach. As far as kind of like other coaches having to pick up this team to play them as a kind of stand-in position, I don't think I find them particularly easy to just pick up and stand in with. They've got kind of relatively obvious positionals with relatively obvious jobs, but I think there's an awful lot to kind of consider with the positionals you've got, how to place them, how to set up, and how to run it. What do you think? Didn't overly find them easy as a standing coach for the game we'll come to in a second.
But the key thing is, did you have fun with them? Because I haven't found a single person, regardless of what the result was, that didn't have fun with them. There's some really annoying players in them. I find them really good fun to play with because, like you say, there's some obvious ones. There's like the werewolves, which you think, oh, they're going to be really good. The fresh golems and the wraiths. I know how much Scotland loves those wraiths. But they are just, there's a load of those annoying players where, you know, the Wraiths are those hidden superstars in that team where people go, oh, I'm going to blitz that. Okay. You know, disturbing presence. Oh, great. You know, or is it foul appearance? One or the other where they have to foul appearance where they have to do it. And then they manage to do it. And then they go, oh, I got to push. You know, sidestep. Oh my goodness, I'm in even worse position. All that kind of fun and games with them. I know that they are a very good team, and I know there was comments afterwards saying that they should be a tier 1 team rather than a tier 2 team. I don't know what people's views on that are.
I think they're tier 1. I feel like they're tier 1. I feel like when I've looked at tournament rosters and when you can put 8 skills across all of those already good positionals, I feel like it just feels like they're tier 1. That just feels like too much for for them. Yeah, gut says tier 1.
Well, get and play them before they get nerfed in the next FAQ then.
Well done, Tom. A draw, maybe not the result you wanted, but unbeaten in this group stage. 4 wins, 4 draws, which are still a very strong group stage result. Fingers crossed it is enough to keep you in that top 4. On to the next standing game, which was 2-0 to the Norse team. Me not gelling with the Necromantic Horror quite as well as Luke did, very clearly. 2-0, 1-1 on the casualties here. A really fun game. Like, I do get that they're a fun team. I got slightly blinded by the ability to frenzy people off the pitch, and that probably did affect some of my decision making at some points. Dave, in the first few turns of this game, Dave was getting quite unlucky with his dice rolls and mine, and that did feel like it evened out as the game went on. I think I was one dodge away from a early lead with the werewolf, but the dodge didn't come out as I wanted, and then failed to kind of recover from that point. Having kind of committed a lot to probably the wrong places through inexperience here. Dave looking very strong with this North team at the minute. He's also currently unbeaten, but with a number of games left to play. Looking like if there's anyone, I think he's the only person in that division who can go above the Cherry Bombs and make it into that top 4. Scott, coming to you first. Dave doing very well with this team, mainly random inducements, but a lot of very good, random skills, a lot of good random skills that he's got on some of these players. And is that something that is kind of that Norse are prone to? Do they have enough of the right skills to start with that you can maybe be a bit more relaxed and build them quite quickly because you've already got a lot of good starting skills?
Having block across all your linemen doesn't do any harm, Chris. For absolutely, he's rolled really well. He's kept the ones he wants in terms of the randoms as well. So having 2 players with strip ball, sure feet on another, Dauntless and Pro is always a useful one on a lineman as well. Tackle, no one's favorite, especially for edge coaches as well. Grab, you don't see that much of as well, but for a secondary. But yeah, I could do, it'll keep a player where you want to keep them, especially if you want to keep someone close to the line, surrounded by lots of block players as well. Dodge, always a good one, as we always know. And then, no one's going to say no to someone with frenzy and guard sitting there on the line, just waiting. So I think he's looking very good. He's got a good random set. He's got a good base there. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see how his next matches go. He is unbeaten. He's had, apart from the 2-0 win against yourself, Chris, but that with all due respect, all of his other wins, all of his other results actually have been either it's been 1-0, 1-1, or even 2-1, just a +1 win there against Graham. I think there's a lot there to do. I think Dave is a very experienced coach. We've seen that with his Amazons previously. We've seen it previously. He knows what to do. Can he get? He could easily get top of the league. It depends on how his other matches go as well. He's got to play some other key coaches, such as Phil, that we'll come on to talk about as well. So there's going to be myself, Tom, and probably a lot of other people paying very close attention to those in the next couple of weeks.
Mr. Huns, Dave could break into that top 4. He could get himself up there. Like Scott said, could top the table. Currently, his team is very much randomly built with the skills on there. You've played Norse yourselves in a previous season, so we'll have some knowledge of them. Do you is he one that you feel like you would have kind of a good matchup for with your Chaos Dwarf team?
I mean, when I played him, it was a good match. I mean, we got timeout, which kind of stopped me from being able to get the ball back for a 2-1 win. But I think even if we didn't get timeout, he would probably manage to stop me from getting a winner anyway. I mean, he plays that Norse team very well. The only thing that I'd be concerned about if I were playing that team is the fact that he's got a very bashy corn team to play against, and he's only got 11 players right now for that game. He could get a 12th, but that still probably won't be enough to not end up going down players against corn, because they're corn. They'll just get loads and loads of knockouts, and I need either of them to any result's really fine with me between them two, because they're both competing for top 4. Hopefully a draw would be the best result for me, but yeah, I think Dave, regardless, will probably manage to end up getting in top 4, because yeah, he's just very good coach and his team's solid.
Tom, Dave is looking very strong. Jack's games are being played by stand-ins now. Do you think that Dave is, going on his previous kind of form? He did a very good season with gnomes, considering that they're gnomes. He got to the final with his lizards after 2 seasons. He could find himself sort of surrounded by a lot of agility in that top grouping with the likes of elves and vampires. He's got some tackle there already. Will that be enough to cope with sort of the wood elves and the vampires when he comes against them?
Yeah, I reckon so. Norse have always been my bogey team. Whenever I've played against them, I've never beaten them because of that block, and I suppose that sometimes gives the coach a bit of confidence to go in and start punching and causing trouble. So I think it's pretty even Stevens. He's a very calculated coach. He reads the board very well. And just to point out, there was a fantastic formation on the last touchdown, I believe.
It was beautiful. It was beautiful. It was a perfect diagonal line of cheering, drinking Norsemen to the touchdown. Yeah, my bad. What can I say? Yeah, it was very well done. Well done to Dave. A good result in that game. On to our penultimate game then. We're back with the Shambling Undead with a 2-0 victory over the A&D Dark Elves, the Dark Elves stand-in. Many thanks to Jane for being our stand-in coach for this game. Mr. Hunge, you look at kind of the way that this game unfolded. And without being in the room, my guess would be a relatively methodical stall to turn 8 touchdown in turn 1, and then a quick touchdown or turnaround in turn turn 8, another quick one in turn 12, at which point the game is done. And hey, you got MVP by the looks of it. A relatively calculated game, I reckon, from the Shambling Undead.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Dave's, he's just got so much experience with that team. I mean, I think you could put anyone in front of Dave and he would give them a really, really tough game, just because of how good he is with that team and how good of a coach he is. Yeah, and it just seems like another one of those games where he just shuts the other person down, scores again. Yeah.
Another very good-looking, highly skilled team here, Scott. Some very key players there. Lewandowski with dodge, block, strip ball, jump up, and tackle is looking particularly sort of fiery. I feel like Dave is playing like he's got a point to prove. Last season, he wasn't able to play his semi-final, missed out on getting through to possibly through to the final. I feel like he's got what he needs to get pretty far here if he can break into that top 4.
Yes, he can. We talked about Robert Lewandowski this season. We talked about him last season. He is a very ominous goal runner as well. So to have the white blitzers, particularly with the tackle, mighty blow so he's got the ability there with the block, with tackle as well to go, some toe to toe with some of the bashier teams, but then he's got tackle as well if he needs to take on the edge teams as well. So he's got a really good balance. And we've talked about this before. People think, Shambling Undead, but he's got 4 movement 7 pieces with the ghoul runners as well. So yeah, and Dave knows exactly how to play this and get the most bang for his buck out of this team. So whoever I think goes he plays, and these matches are going to be really, really close. You know, we do have a very good quality of Blood Bowl coach, so it'll be interesting to see how tour play decides the final, mix and the actual playoffs. But as we've said, there's 2 weeks to go. A lot can happen in this league, and there are a lot of coaches who can have an impact.
Mr. Hovell.
Sorry, and well done, Tom Huns, on your MVP. Well done, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Hovell, then, looking at the Shambling Undead team, I feel like we're going to see Shambling a lot, largely because it is one of the teams that has been on Blood Bowl 3 more recently. It's now been on long enough that lots of coaches have played a lot of it. Do you think that means we're going to see a lot more Shambling Undead in future seasons? Because especially if Dave can kind of show that they have championship material, they're tier 1, they're clearly tier 1 for a reason. Do we need to get used to seeing these mummies?
Maybe. I was personally thinking there might be more elves and chaos dwarfs next year, to be honest. Yeah, it's one of those things with these Shambling Undead. They're a team that have never piqued my interest, but clearly Dave has got a good understanding of them and clearly plays them a lot. I've seen him play them in tournaments as well. So he knows how they work and how to get the best out of them. But also a little bit of a kind of word of warning for him, because, you know, as Scott well knows, you know, they're getting close to the top of the table. They need to hold on to some of these players, because not all of those players are going to be around. You know, if those rights, so for that, like the right blitzer, if that one goes, which has got tackle, mighty blow, is that going to be a big impact on his game? Equally, that ghoul runner with block, strip ball, jump up, tackle, that is a horrible threat to anyone. But take him out of the game, and again, does that kind of really hinder this team?
And we are seeing a lot of big teams lose players in Game 8.
Yeah.
So absolutely could happen. Dave will be wanting to keep hold of as many of these players as possible. On to our last game then. A marathon of games we've had, but we're on to the last one. The T-Belly Trudgers with their last game of the group stage, a 1-1 draw versus the Top Hat Society. A result that I know that a certain Snotling team will be very pleased with in the hunt for the Stunty Cup. A very impressive number of casualties coming from the Chaos Dwarf side here. Looks like another team who is maybe going to be missing a few of their players for the playoff stage. Mr. Hans, this halfling team have done very well. The trees are very terrifying. They're the only team to take points away from the vampires this season. So a very good season for them. Do you think that the halflings have enough, looking at the gnomes and looking at the chaotic snotlings that we've got? Are they the favourites for the Stunty Cup at this point if they all end up in the same knockout bracket?
I mean, I think out of the two, there's only really two teams that I see going for the Stunty Cup, to be honest, and that's the Halflings and the Snotlings, because although the Gnomes are like very well-built team now, they're still Gnomes. They're all Armor 7. They're very die, whereas at least the other teams like Snotlings just have infinite players, just have about like so many players, so it doesn't really matter how many you kill. They just have infinite amounts of Snotlings. And the Halflings they're very solid, especially with the Master Chef as well, just taking away your rerolls, and especially those Treemen. Those Treemen look terrifying. I'm glad I don't have to play against them. Yeah, I mean, it just seems very tight for the Stunty Cup, to be honest.
Having a look at the at how this game went down then, and particularly looking at the Hobgoblin Journeyman that came in, because Carl has alerted you. I wasn't aware of this, and I am now kind of looking through it, Tom, looking through this kind of how this game unfolded. A turn 16 touchdown for the Journeyman, and then MVP for the Journeyman. Now, in a way, that sucks, but you do have the option to hire him, and I feel like that's a 7 SPP journeyman that maybe you want on your team.
And I think he actually did hire him, because he's now sitting on his team with sure hands.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would have hired him as well if he's doing that for you, definitely. Yeah, it looks like an interesting game. Out of all these games, all the weather has been nice. It's been interesting, like talking about these all of the games so far in the season. There seems to be weeks where there's constant weather changes, and everyone has bad weather or sunny or blizzards or whatever. And then there's weeks where there's just perfect weather throughout. So this is one of those interesting ones, because I don't know how much Justin's actually played against these Newcastle Dwarfs either. So it's potentially a bit of a learning curve for him. But clearly it was paying off, because he does like to foul with these halflings, and critically he's just taken a movement off a bull centaur, which is a horrible thing to happen to a bull centaur, which is one of their primary things, is to be able to move around the pitch really quickly. Another one was that these bombers are really starting to become a common sight on the pitches at Arbuckle Dragons. I took Cindy. Cindy was on this one. Obviously, Bomber Dribble Start has been on a number of them. Probably a little bit less next time by the sounds of Tom's game. But it's interesting to see that these repeatable star players are in there. So this game was going on the other table, and it was a nice game to hear and listen to, because you got two completely different coaches here, and I think with that draw, I know you're saying that Justin will be happy with it. I personally think he might not have been. I think he was probably hoping that he could have got that win on this game. I don't know.
Well, I think what's interesting now looking at it, both teams took decent amounts of inducements. Looking at the team value after Journeyman, there wasn't a lot in it. So Treasury has been spent in this game. So you've got Cindy and the Master Chef, you've got Acorn and a keg and a mascot. So lots of inducements coming on both sides. The game sounded pretty chaotic. Two centaurs surfed in the same turn, by the sounds of it, from Justin, which is a incredible feat here. Scott, I mean, we just were talking about the Stunty Cup, sounding like the Stunty Cup may come from this division without writing the names off quite yet. Do you think, sort of looking at the coaches and the teams that Justin has had to play and around him, I think it feels to me like Stunty Cup will be very impressive, and it's been very impressive how many casualties he's got with those trees. Looking at some of his opponents, he has some very strong games that he's come out of relatively scot-free.
He has. He's had some really, really tough games. With regards to the Stunty Cup, just going back to that point, I agree with what Mr. Hun said. It feels at the moment that the halflings and the Snotleys rather, are really sort of slightly ahead of the gnomes in terms of favour for this. Again, without using the cliche too many times, a lot can happen in the next 2 weeks. I think as well, Justin's played some incredibly, great Blood Bowl, and we saw that he was the only one to take points off John. And that was a last minute, some great. If you go back to YouTube to watch how he pulled that one off, but it was a really, really good match. And again, and this one, yes, he served the Centaurs. He got it down. So again, it was felt one of those where in Blood Bowl, sometimes if it's not going to be your night, it's not going to be your night, no matter what you try. But a big shout out here to Harry. We talked about previously, he'd had a bit of a difficult run. New team, he stuck at it. He's come away with a very, very well-deserved point against a very experienced coach. So well done, both of them.
And a lot of SPP for Harry as well. 17 SPP out of this game. Exactly what you want. If you're going to lose points against a stunty team, but you can get lots of casualties, it's very good for the team development. So well done, Harry, for a good result against a good coach. Well done, Justin, for a very strong group stage with those halflings. Looking hopeful for a slot in the fifth to eighth bracket. We'll see how other results go as to whether they can keep hold of them. Looking at the tables then. In the ABBC, we have got Atomic Cherry Bombs now sitting comfortable at the top there. Numpty's second, Chaos Storm in third, and the Knuffle Dusters move up to fourth. Knuffle Dusters, World Edge Berserkers, Gilded Knights of Cerulean, Rust Bay Riptides all sit there on 11 points, all with games left to play. So it's going to be very tight for that final spot in the top there. Jane, with 2 games left to play, could also be in the mix as well and make her way up there. So a lot.
I think
play
also, Chris,
for.
you can't count out Tom and the Gnomes, who we just mentioned as well. He's still got 3 games to go.
Gnomes still with a maximum of 17 points. So it's going to be very, very tight at the top there to see who clings on to those. I think there's going to be a disappointed coach in 5 to 8 and maybe in 9 to 12 as well. Looking at the bottom end of the table, Clueless Crusaders don't quite manage to get to safety, but are still sitting in 12th there, above of the Deadskins, the Hillbeat Howlers, Odin's Ravens, and Boulders Bowlers, who make out the bottom of the table there. Looking in the MBBC, Transfigurian Terrors comfortably at the top there, looking difficult to budge. Ducks still in second with 2 games coming this week. Gladiators and Dead Star Belgrave move up into 4th place. Again, looking at 8th up to 2nd here, 11 to 15 points. Again, a very, very tight mix. Anyone in that top group could claim that's one of those spots in the top 4, along with the Buffalo Biggins and the Suffolk Suckers and the Riotous Rams, who are currently down in 12th. So much competition for a space in the top 4 and even 5 to 8 in this group. Looking at the bottom end of the table, Inglorious Bustards sit in 14th. Having played all their games, they will remain there, as will the Dark Elves. Boulders Army still winless at the bottom as well. That is all our games. That is all of the games for this week. 2 weeks left of games to go. If you've got any games left to play, please try and get them booked in as quickly as possible. Please make sure you're scheduling them on Tour Play as well, so that we can see what games are coming up. There are some very, very key fixtures. Riotous Rams are looking to have a very, very quick run of games in the next 2 weeks, and they could absolutely upset the top of the MBBC. So please keep a lookout for those. Thank you very much, Scott. Thank you very much, Mr. Hovell. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Huns. Best of luck to everyone in their next few games. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on the Roundup this week. We will see you next week.